You may have noticed I shaved my face. Finally shaved my face. It's a big day for me. It's not that big of a day. I was growing a playoff beard for the Dodgers. Couldn't go any farther than Saturday. So it was coming off one way or the other, and it was very exciting to take it back down to the nubs here. I go from looking like I need to score some hooch to gosh, I look at myself on the screen with a hat on. I don't look like I'm in my 40s. Now, if you take the hat off, I look like I'm in my 40s. Male pattern age tracking, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I'm Dan Besbris. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Besbris, DanBesbris. Old Man Squad, also on social media. If you want the network feed, please like, rate, subscribe as you're settling in. And, of course, know in your heart of hearts that this show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel and the FanDuel Sportsbook, as well as this show being a Believe Network podcast show. This is your week 3 preview edition. I thought I'd flip it, do the preview first and then the weekend recap second because, well, honestly, like this one, you're planning ahead. So whatever. We're going to dive into it. Weekly preview time. We'll start with the injury report and then we'll move on over to the streaming guide. Try to knock this bad boy out in about 20 to 25 minutes. That way you can segue into the big weekend recap so you then kind of learn who the ads are that have more appeal than just game over game over game. You guys know the drill at this point. We just bring up the top basically 200 names pre-rank. By the time we get to about week 4, week 5, we'll start to look at the actual rank as opposed to pre-rank. But right now, a lot of players are still being graded on what we expected of them coming into the season as opposed to what they've actually done so far. So that's how I've got it organized. It's much easier this way. We'll keep it simple. We'll just scroll through. This is mostly an injury recap, but also this, I think, is somewhat of a useful tool for weekly lineup shows. And I should mention, and I think I did a better job of this last week, although I didn't get to the last few questions right before tip because there was stuff going on in my house, which when is there not? But if you have questions on a weekly lineup decision, throw those in the comments on YouTube, and I'm going to try to check in on that at about 2:30 Pacific time, like right before my kids get home from school. And I should be able to bang out answers to, 15, 20, 25, 30 questions or whatever in the YouTube description. That's where you guys can get your weekly lineup decision kind of questions. So let's just start at the top, but we're all the way through. Giannis Antetokounmpo, I'll throw that up on the screen for you guys if it actually loads. He is probable. Fear nothing. Go ahead and get him into your lineup. Anthony Edwards, good news today is that he was cleared to resume basketball activities. I don't know exactly what that means in terms of when he's going to get back on the court. I would assume that we're still a game or two away, but who knows? He's a very impressive healer. They have a 4-game week. Let's see if we get some more news before their game in Brooklyn tonight, which he's almost definitely not going to play in. But if there's a chance we think we could get 2 games out of him, then maybe you actually consider dropping him into your lineup. Anthony Davis, I would rest him. I know technically he could come back by some point this week, but also he's Anthony Davis, so I don't think we can expect that. Trae Young is out a month at least. Chet Holmgren, I don't know what's going on there, but you got to bench him until we hear that he's back. Maybe we'll get some news on him later today. OKC plays in Los Angeles against the Clippers. LaMelo Ball, most likely, it seemed like he was out because of a back-to-back. We don't know for sure because he actually played in the Hornets' first back-to-back this season. So, and the bad news here, of course, is they don't play today. So we're not going to get another report on LaMelo before their game tomorrow. I'm probably leaving him in lineups, but I'm also terrified about it and fully willing to admit that we might be getting that one wrong. Next name on the list, Jamal Murray, is probable for Denver, so you can go ahead and leave him in there unless we get some sort of report that things get slotted downward. Seems like he should be fine, and he's been awesome so far this year. He's number 16. It's exactly why we were high on him, and he's done that and then some more. This is a weirdly healthy stretch of 25 names. John Morant has that game time decision tag, but he was serving a 1-game suspension, so you can go ahead and get him back into your lineups as well. Keep on rolling. We're moving through the top whatever. Zach LaVine is questionable. I think he's one of those ones where you should probably just parallel whatever you see. We call that mirroring on these weekly preview shows. If he sits out their game in Denver, I would probably just sit him. He's been a very, very good scorer so far this year. High volume, 53-94 splits. But all of his value is tied up in scoring. He's a guy that seems like he's almost doomed to slide down the board. Not that he's going to not have a decent season. We figured he was going to be like perfectly fine to draft in that 50 to 65 range. But that's still what I think he's going to be this season. I don't think he's going to shoot high volume 53-94. Especially when you look at the peripheral stuff, like no steals, no assists, almost no rebound. It's all just high intensity scoring. But that's not even the point. With LaVine, like, yes, he's been a top 20 guy so far this year, but you can't think of him as a guy that if he's hurt, you take him out of your lineup, you're not losing a top 20 guy. He's still eventually going to be a top 50 type of dude. So play that one safe is my take on LaVine. I know they've got a 4-game week, but if he gets ruled out today, I would probably think about benching. Walker Kessler's a weird one. He's sort of his own individual injury report. He was sent back to Salt Lake City for extra testing on his shoulder. Yusuf Nurkic got the bump up in Utah. Utah also decided to flip Taylor Hendricks and Kyle Filipowski. I don't know if they were tied or if it was just like a Filipowski hasn't been very good, so they decided to give Taylor a try instead. But whatever, they made a couple of roster or starting lineup adjustments in their most recent ball game, and Hendricks looked pretty good. I think, because remember, Taylor's still working his way from a pretty catastrophic injury last year. I don't think they're going to try to hammer him in there for 30 minutes a game yet, but I do think there's a possibility he gets there. So Hendricks would be, to me, a pretty important add, and we'll talk about more. We'll talk more about him on our weekend recap show. But Nurk is also probably like a one-burger fill-in guy for Kessler, because I don't think he's going to play more than 24, 25 minutes. But Nurk has turned himself into a guy that gets more assists and steals and rebound. Like, he just racks up stats in the minutes he's on the court these days, and I hope that continues, because I think about it. As far as Kessler goes, I tried to avoid Utah. I tried to avoid Brooklyn. So if you got him, you're stuck with it at this point. Joel Embiid sat out the no, that's not right. He sat out a non-back-to-back. Whoops. This is what happens over the weekend. Sometimes I get lost in my own thoughts. This one, it wasn't a back-to-back, but it feels like it was one of those ones where they knew they were playing a team trying to lose because it was Brooklyn. I would assume that he also sits out one half of the upcoming Tuesday, Wednesday back-to-back and the upcoming Saturday, Sunday back-to-back. So this is a 2-game week for Embiid. I don't think he's a must-play guy in a 2-game week at this 20, 22, 23-minute cap. I think I'd probably sit him in a 2-game week if you're in a weekly lineup deal. You're not playing Darius Garland until he plays. Brandon Miller, same thing. You're not going to play him until he's actually back on the court. DeAndre Ayton, the Lakers have a game tonight. He's dealing with some back soreness. He sat out the Lakers win over the Heat on Sunday. It's a 3-game week, so weekly lineup, folks, if he's not playing it, if he gets ruled out in Portland, then you shut him down for the week. If you're not allowed to wait until later to make your call on him, because that's one of the later ball games, I would probably just bench Ayton this week in weekly formats. Jared Allen, same story. Look, he hasn't been that great so far this year anyway. I think he'll be fine. But this is a weird schedule for Cleveland. They're off. They play 1 game in the next 4 days. Then they've got a really good schedule starting on Friday. But I think you're benching Jared Allen this week because we're not going to get any info on him until Wednesday. And if he misses that game, then it's a 2-game week, and he's simply not good enough as I know he's like sitting inside the top 100 right now, but he's basically a top 60 kind of reliable center, and top 60 in a 2-game week is typically not good enough. You're not playing Norman Powell until he actually gets back out on the court, and let's go to the next 25. What do we got here? Anybody? Yeah, you're not playing Mathurin until he gets a good report. You're not playing Pirtle or Kobe White until we get any kind of positive report there. Same story for Andrew Nembhard and for Jalen Green. Down here, we get into a couple of the game time decision guys. Tobias Harris is questionable. They have a game today that's relatively early. It's a Central Time start in Memphis. You can go with the mirror on Tobias. Like, he's been perfectly fine this year, but you're not going to miss out on a ton if you have to take Tobias Harris out of your lineup. Detroit has a 4-game week. So, yeah, you might end up benching him, and you might still get 3 games out of Harris, but also somebody on your bench or on the wire in 4 games is probably just as good as Tobias in 3. So I don't think you have to worry too much about that. Josh Hart, a lot of reports are coming out that he's dealing with some nerve issues. That is more troubling to me than the fluctuating minutes, because it may explain why he's shooting 31% and just not taking any shots, and 71% at the foul line. And he's still doing all of his rebounding and assisting. But if he's not going to shoot at all, it's going to be really tough for him to get where I wanted him to be. And this is just not something that I knew about going into the season, or honestly could have known about. My hope is that we get through it, because I do think Josh Hart playing minutes around 26 to 32 range, somewhere in there, will still be a very useful fantasy player. But if he's playing hurt the whole time, then he won't be. If you have him, sit on him. If you don't have him, let's wait and learn more about whatever this is going on in his wrist. I think it's wrist. I would not call him a buy low, because this new injury thing is troubling. Shaedon Sharpe is probable, I believe, for Portland. He's a points league super darling. He struggles a bit in traditional 9-cat. He's a buy low in 9-cat if he fits your build, because 35% from the field is not going to hold. But he's also a little bit of a sell high. It's not true. But he's not going to shoot 95% of the free throw line. So there's some balancing that needs to go on here. The field goal issue is a bigger one than the positive you're getting out of free throws. There will be some balancing that goes on there. But I still see him as more of like a 100 range 9-cat guy who's much better than that in points formats. How many more pages of these are we going to do? A couple more pages of these. Cam Johnson is probable, although I think you can potentially wait out until he hits a comfort zone. You're not dropping him because, look, he's just better than what you've seen so far, and he's not going to take 6 shots a game. That's going to work its way up as he settles in. He's going to get some steals. He's not going to average 1.2 threes a game. It's going to get better. But also, you could bench him because he's been bad so far. Dylan Harper got himself seemingly pretty hurt in their Spurs last ball game, so bench him until further notice. Paul George, keep him on your bench. Dylan Brooks, keep him on your bench. Dennis Schroeder is coming off a huge game that pushed him back into 9-cat territory. He's questionable, and much like Zach LaVine, probably a guy you consider doing the mirroring with. And I know it's a 3-game week, but look, Schroeder's another guy where you can probably find somebody with 4 games that Schroeder gives you in 3. Unless you get a really good one. And maybe that's the other thing. Like, Malik Monk is out for personal reasons. Not a guy that I'm playing anyway. He's way out over his skis in percentages. But if Schroeder plays, okay, so that's the other thing. These sort of go together. If Monk sits and Schroeder also sits, one doesn't help the other. If Monk sits, Schroeder could have a really big ball game because you're taking out one of the other guards in the equation. So, yeah, probably a mirror on Schroeder. By the way, not hurt, but you might want to bench Khalil Ware. Zach Edey, not back yet. Keep him on your bench. Let's keep going a little farther. There's some other names to discuss here. Derek Lively, keep him benched until he's back. Jabari Smith Jr., I didn't even realize that there was something hanging over him. All right. Well, he participated in shoot-around, so he's probably a go. Middleton, no. Porter Jr., no. Keegan Murray, no. I bet he's close, though. I bet we see Keegan Murray by the end of this week. That's my assumption. You're not going to play him, but I'm starting to feel like we're getting there. Isaiah Collier, no. Ty Jerome, no. Obi Toppin, no. Is there anybody else that we need to talk about here? I think we're basically at the end of the line. Lou Dort, Jared McCain, Scoot Henderson, DeJounte Murray, Kyrie Irving, Scottie Pippen Jr., Jaden Ivey, TJ McConnell, Jeremy Sohan. No, none of these guys are worth even a moment of your time. We're doing the quick scroll here. Yeah, I think we're past the point. If any of these guys are even game time calls as you get into this neighborhood, you don't have to worry about them. So that's the injury report portion of today's show, which took a little longer than expected, but that's where we're at, and that's okay. A reminder again that this show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel and the FanDuel Sportsbook. If you're thinking about getting down on some action today, do it with our friends at FanDuel, and consider doing it on a game where you feel you have some confidence. You think the Lakers can hang in there with Portland on a tough back-to-back? I don't know. Maybe. Back-to-backs are tough when you're a shorthanded team. What about the Clippers? Are they going to beat up on the Heat, who have a Los Angeles area back-to-back? Clippers are laying 8.5. Blazers laying 3. Interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. Maybe you go Lakers catching points. I don't know. You're paying a premium there. In any event, all that and more over at FanDuel and the FanDuel Sportsbook. Give them a check today. Tell them Dan sent you. It'll do nothing for you. Also, I try to mention this on every podcast. Thank you, first of all, to all of you that have joined the $1 Patreon. This month, we are going to have our first Patreon subscriber pod. I was considering just doing one with my wife. I feel like all of you guys that have watched this show for years would love to hear from the person that puts up with me day in and day out. I'm a lot, if you guys weren't able to gather that. I'm a fragile, delicate man, although I'm pretty even-keeled. So as delicate as I am and as many needs as my actual my crappy constitution requires, I'm a pretty chill dude. Like, if I can eat simple things and digest them and keep your illnesses away from me, then I'm a pretty mellow guy. So I don't know. Wouldn't you guys be interested in hearing what my wife has to say? In any event, mostly the purpose of the Patreon is so that I can afford to do all this stuff for free for everybody, for the entire public forever. I know some of you guys probably wish that you could pay a bunch and have all my stuff to yourselves, but that's not the way I want to do it. I think fantasy should be fun, and the way we make fantasy fun and win is for everybody to have access to information. And so that's what I'm trying to do here. Consider it. It's in the show description. Old Man Squad is the link there. Patreon.com/Old Man Squad. Old Man Squad is the handle, I guess I should have said. It's $1. That's it. It's basically nothing. But if, 500 or 600 of you guys do it, then it's not nothing anymore. So thank you in advance if you can do it. If you can't, don't worry about it. I'm going to keep doing this as long as humanly possible, which I've already said is at least this season and next season. And by then, Patreon, I think, will be big enough that we can just do it forever. Streaming grid. Let's get that on the board, and you're going to need that in large size font. We'll zoom in a little bit here. You know what? Let's go full screen. Dismiss. Zoom in. Hold the pane. And there we go. Week 3. This is a little bit more of a hot and cold week in terms of scheduling. Last week, there were a lot of pretty mellow days, a lot of 5s, 4s, 8s, 6s. This week, you've got a 9, 6, 11, 1, 11 in the middle of the week, and then an 8 and a 7 to finish it off. But even still, by the law of averages, 11 out of a possible 15 games is still not typically enough to give you a full roster. Because remember, full roster is 10 out of 13. That's 77% of your traditional lineup needs to be active. 11 out of 15, I think I said was like 33. I looked this up before the ball game. I'll do it now. 73. Sorry, not 33. 73. So, yeah, some of you will have a full roster because that's how probability works. But more than 50% of you will be on the less than 10 guys playing. Because 9 out of 13 is 69% and 77. So it's like 9.5, basically. Meaning that there are X number of ways that you could have more than 9.5 and X number of ways that you could have less. And you're going to get that bell curve that rolls out in either direction. So 9.5, yeah, I mean, you could think that maybe you round up and you're damn close to it. But 12 is where you actually hit you should have a full lineup. Meaning you might, depending on how your team is constructed, just players-wise, what team they're on, you might be able to stream the whole week and not have a full lineup. I don't know. Only you know that because you run your team and I can't see it. And every team, I mean, there's so many millions of different permutations of a team you could have to have 9, 10, 11 guys, 12 playing, however, on a given day. So what I'll say is we'll just treat this week like you can stream. But the other side of that is, like what we talked about last week, I don't think that this is a time where you want to overstream. This is still a time where you should be looking for guys that have longer term appeal. Meaning you could be looking for guys that have injury replacement appeal, because some of those are very, very good. You could be looking for guys that just got slotted into a bigger role. Josh Minot last week being a prime example of that. And these guys might last a while. Someone like a Jeremiah Fears. Jeremy. Yeah, he and I, we're on a super informal basis at this point. Fears out in New Orleans, he's playing more, but I don't know that his game is perfect for every team. this is, to me, that's just like, this is what you should be looking for right now. But most clubs have one dead roster slot. Most of you. And if you don't, just wait it out. People are like, oh, I need to stream. You don't need to. At some point, someone on your team is going to get hurt or suck or whatever, and you're going to have that slot open again. You're not going to have 13 guys that are just good all season long in a competitive league. It doesn't work that way. You might have 13 guys that are good right now, but just wait it out at that point. But most of you, I think the vast majority, you have one roster slot that you're like, yeah, I can transition this one into something else. And so if you're thinking about that, the team you want to abandon ship on here quickly is likely the Charlotte Hornets. They are the only 2-game week here in week 3. So that's a pretty easy decision. There are a lot of teams that play 4 times, and you could just make one move if you wanted to and turn your 2-game week into a 4-game week. Or, if you'd like, you can start with the Los Angeles Clippers, who are the only team that goes back-to-back today and tomorrow and doesn't have a long lag after that. Milwaukee has a back-to-back to start the week, but then they play 1 game over the following 4 days, which basically forces you to pivot off the Bucks on Wednesday. That said, if you are, by the way, there's no Wednesday, Thursday back-to-back because the only teams that play Thursday are the Clippers and the Suns, and neither one of those teams plays on Wednesday or Friday. So if you're abandoning ship on Wednesday, you're doing it for someone that, I don't know, does anybody even go 3 times in 4 days starting on Wednesday? Yeah, there's a couple of teams. Cleveland does, so there's a few. So you'd be looking for a team that goes 3 times in 4 days starting on Wednesday, and that's workable, but that's why you kind of want to now grade out the quality of the streamers you're looking at. So if you're looking at the Clippers, you probably have a couple of streamers that are worth considering. One in particular, Derek Jones Jr. is the Clipper to me that's probably on your waiver wire and probably and you could stream not only for the back-to-back but a little bit longer. He's hovering just outside the top 100 in mid-20s minutes. He's going to do it on good field goal percent, some defensive stats, and a couple of threes. That's basically where you're getting out of him. There really isn't anybody else on the Clippers that's remotely close to fantasy value that isn't definitely on rosters. Because Kawhi, Zoo, Harden, those guys are on rosters. Collins is likely on rosters while we all kind of figure out what he's going to be. And so that's that. Milwaukee probably has more options of streamable guys. Rollins is on rosters by now. Giannis and Miles Turner are on rosters. But Gary Trent is probably not. He's streamable. AJ Green is streamable. Cole Anthony is streamable. Not great, but streamable. Taurean Prince, also not great, but streamable. Kuzma, Bobby Portis, all of these guys kind of suck, but in a back-to-back, they don't suck so much. Because 2 games out of a guy like a Kyle Kuzma, it gives you 20 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists on probably not great percentages, but like a steal and a block. That's fine. That's workable. Cole Anthony in a back-to-back, 18, 19 points, 6, 7 assists. Like, this is reasonable stuff that you'd love to get out of somebody in one game, but that guy probably isn't out there. So you play the numbers. You play the guy that you think you're going to get 50 minutes out of or more on the back-to-back. So let's say you're going Milwaukee to start the week, and I didn't color code them because I don't like the fact that you have to make a move on Wednesday, but you do kind of have to make a move on Wednesday. The good news there is if you're looking for somebody that goes 3 times in 4 days, your choices are, I don't want to say plentiful, but relatively so. Cleveland, Dallas, Denver, count them out as we're scrolling on the screen. Miami, and is there one more? 2 more. San Antonio and Washington. And I'm not going to go through every name that you could pick on those 6 teams, but having 6 choices is pretty reasonable. However, this is where you need to go back and find out if you're overloaded on Wednesday or Friday, because all of those teams are Wednesday, Friday teams. The reason to stick with someone like a Derek Jones Jr. is because the Clippers play on Thursday. That is a valuable day because only 1 game happening on that one, meaning whatever game you get on Thursday, that's not going to push you into overload territory. So check your whole week out right now. Check out what your week looks like after you drop your Charlotte Hornet and pivot to either a Clipper or a Buck, and make sure that you're not creating an overload situation where if you pick up a Buck and then need to make a move on Wednesday, you might not be gaining any games played. Whereas if you go Clippers, you're definitely gaining one on that Thursday. The other thing you can do is, let's say you do stick with the Clippers, there are options, Cleveland being the best of them, on Friday that start a 5-game in 7-day stretch. There's also Milwaukee that starts a 5-game and 7-day stretch on Sunday. So there's some pretty good scheduling spots towards the end of the week. A lot of teams go back-to-back Friday, Saturday. If you held on to a Clipper through Thursday, basically, and you were like, this player, like Derek Jones Jr., is not doing it for me anymore. I want to go to somebody that goes Friday, Saturday. You could also then pivot off to someone else on Sunday. I would suggest the Milwaukee Bucks, because then you could just hold them for an entire week if you wanted to. But there are a lot of options towards the end of this week, where beginning of the week, not as many choices. And I think that's probably the way that you stream this week. Because again, I don't want you streaming 2 roster slots this early in the season. I want you hunting for longer term value out of one of those 2. Just stream one. So make a move today if you need to. Make a move on Wednesday if you have a Buck, or Friday if you have a Clipper. That gets you to your 2 moves on the week. If you picked up someone on Friday from the Clippers, you could make your 3rd move on Sunday and save one for something else if you want. If you go Bucks, you're probably going to make another move on Sunday as well. So that's 3 of your 4 weekly moves. You don't have to use up all 4 if you don't want to. If you really, really, really wanted to, you could. I mean, if you went Milwaukee, you could go Wednesday for your 2nd move, Thursday for your 3rd move, Friday for your 4th, but that's a little bit dumb. I'd rather just save the 4th move and say, in case somebody pops up. That's amazing. If a really cool player pops up, you want to have a weekly move hanging around where you can make a play on someone that's not a streamer. Heaven forbid. Thanks for watching, everybody. That's your week 3 preview. Put your questions in the comments on the YouTube page. I'm going to try to get to those in the afternoon. I'm Dan Bespris, at Dan Bespris on Twitter. Follow immediately. Last name is Bespris, Besbris. And thank you again to all of you that have put $1 in the tip jar over at Patreon. Stay tuned for an update on the first subscriber pod. In the meantime, let's go win the week. I'll be right back with you guys. I'm going to post this show and immediately record the big weekend recap. So we're going back to back on pods this morning. Yeah, that's it. The end. Goodbye.